2 minutes, I'll do my thing and we'll get this on the road, all right? All right. Good evening, everybody. It's 1700 or 5 o'clock for you civilians. If you all don't know me, I'm Jeremiah Jones. I'm the chair of the Board of Commissioners. I represent Pokagon and Howard Township. Right now, I'm got my other hat on. Come after Memorial Day, I'm gonna wear my white cowboy hat. So I'd ask everybody right now to silence your phones. I don't ask you to turn them off because we've got the most important people in the county in here. We're all leaders, correct? We're all leaders, so yeah, so if we could act appropriate, even though the police is here, I expect us to, this isn't a platform. Only people that are talking would be me, Roseanne, Sarah, and Tyler. We're gonna have questions at the end. And there's inclement weather outside, so if we have a tornado or any emergency, we're all gonna get up calmly and we're gonna go down to the annex where there's hallways and no windows, okay? Here, not so much. So speaking of tornadoes, this is completely off the subject here, but I have to say it. 3 weeks ago, we had the tornadoes here, right, on Friday, and I was on the news, and I did well up until a point to where I said that they asked me if we had plenty of warning. I said yes, and I think my words were absolutely yes, but I misspoke because I was nervous. I'm on the national TV. I didn't know what to say. No excuses for that, but I apologize to the family, and I apologize to anybody that's been affected about me saying that we all had plenty of warning, which obviously one little boy didn't. I pray to God for his family and their safety and not safety, but their comfort, and I'm truly sorry for that. So, all right, back to business. This is educational session only. Got a little script to read. There are no proposals being presented. There's no decisions going to be made tonight about data centers or about anything. All the commissioners are back there. We're not voting. We're not doing anything. Other than me, we're just, regular civilians like everybody else. Our goal is simple. It's to provide accurate research-based information so that local officials, planners, and community leaders are better equipped to understand this topic should it arise in the future. It's all over the nation right now. Tonight is not a public hearing or a debate. Like I said before, this is not a platform. We're not gonna, there's not a platform. It's an opportunity to listen and learn and begin building a shared understanding of the landscape surrounding data centers. You were all given note cards when you entered, or you got them from me. If you have any questions, please write them down on the note card and raise your hand so we can collect them. It'll probably be me or Ambrosia will go around and collect those cards. Ambrosia's the nice young lady back there. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce Commissioner Marchetti. She's gonna introduce Sarah Mills and Tyler Hawks. Thank you.
Good evening. We are very fortunate to be joined this evening by Dr. Sarah Mills from the University of Michigan. Dr. Mills is an associate professor of practice in urban and regional planning and serves as the director of the Center for Empowering Communities at the University of Michigan's Graham Sustainability Institute. Her work focuses on the intersection of energy policy and land use, particularly how large-scale infrastructure projects impact rural communities and how local governments can thoughtfully plan for them. Dr. Mills has worked extensively with communities across Michigan and beyond, helping local officials navigate complex planning decisions related to emerging industries and infrastructure. Her research examines not only the technical aspects of these developments, but also how they affect communities economically, socially, and from a land use perspective. She brings a balanced, practical perspective that is especially valuable for local governments working to understand issues before they become immediate decisions. With that, we'll turn things over to Dr. Mills for her presentation. Dr. Mills, thank you again for being here. We appreciate you sharing your expertise with us this evening.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. Maybe she invited me up here so I could blush or like shrink away. And I'm gonna walk in part because I didn't print out notes and the screen is hidden, so I'm gonna look at the screen along with you guys. I hope it's okay. So I've titled this What Local Governments Should Know About Data Centers. And I'm gonna start out with a confession. I am Dr. Mills, but please just call me Sarah. I didn't know anything about data centers 6 months ago. So like, renewable energy projects and the impacts that those have on communities, as the introduction said. About 6 months ago, I started getting calls from some of the local governments where I had done education, along with Tyler in some places, about large-scale solar. Because in terms of the footprint and where these data centers want to go, it's many of the same places that are being approached for solar. But I've also gotten calls because one of the things that my center directs is, it's called the Catalyst Leadership Circle. So there's a checklist that Michigan local governments who want to be sustainable or show leadership and sustainability can check off. And that's a lot of cities or counties. And some of those folks too were saying, well, what impact is this going to have on our sustainability goals? And so because I was kind of getting pushed from both ends of the spectrum, from rural places as well as those urban places, I thought I should learn myself. So everything that is in here is self-taught over the course of the last 6 months. It's drawn from my experience with renewables. Also, I have counterparts like me in other states who do renewables, but in particular, I leaned on the ones that are in Virginia that have lots of data centers to say, tell me, teach me, what do we need to know here? And in the guidebook that we put together, I sent it out to a bunch of reviewers. We list who they are so you know who we got feedback from. I love questions. Please use those cards to write questions. They're literally my favorite thing. My children and my husband are my favorite, whatever. But I love questions. But the specifics of data centers, like I confess, I can really talk about the land use impacts and that side, not how data centers work or AI or any of that kind of stuff. You'll see the Eagle logo. Sometimes people ask me, who pays for my gas to get here? I think that's a fair question. I am funded by the State Energy Office, which sits in Eagle, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And they fund me to help local governments understand pros and cons and put energy infrastructure into their plans. So that's, just for what it's worth, who funds me, or who funded my gas. So here's my plan for tonight. First, I'm going to give you a couple slides about the basics of data centers, so we're all coming at this, like, understanding what we're talking about. And then talk about possible impacts on both the host community and Michigan as a whole, and the Michigan policy context that shapes those impacts. And then talk about the considerations for local governments. And again, I come at this from a planning perspective, so it's mostly about planning and zoning. What's really interesting, like, why are we talking about it? We've had data centers in the state of Michigan since we've had the internet. Actually, before we had the internet, so that there was computing and processing within businesses. How many data centers depends on how you define a data center. If you define it as kind of closet in a hospital, like then you get a whole lot more than if you think about it as a standalone facility. But I've seen estimates in Michigan of anywhere from 10 to kind of 70 data centers already here. But the reason that they're getting so much attention right now is because we've had this surge in generative AI, artificial intelligence, and that has led to needing even more computers packed closer together. And what that means is those facilities have both bigger land use needs, but also bigger needs for electricity. And so it's that link to electricity that actually got me, who does wind and solar and battery storage projects, interested in this. The other reason that we're seeing interest in the state of Michigan is that about a year and a half ago, the state legislature expanded state sales and use tax exemptions for data centers. I'm going to talk about this in a couple of slides, but we've had a state sales and use tax exemption for data centers since 2015. But this new one effectively caught the attention of more data center developers, and I'll explain in a little bit why. Okay, so what is a data center? Like I said, it can be the IT closet in a hospital or an office building. But generally, it's any physical infrastructure that hosts this kind of equipment. So servers, the computers, effectively, not a non-technological person's language. The networking equipment to get the data that's processed in that facility to and from the internet. Backup power supplies and generators, just like you used to have those like surge protectors that you put on your computer. We don't have those anymore really for like laptops. But you want to protect the servers, those computers inside a data center from kind of imperfections in the electric supply. Computers can get hot. We know this, right, from our lives. So there's cooling systems to cool off the equipment itself and the environment around it. And also security systems, because data is power, right? And there's important information often processed in that facility. And so it can include kind of a security fence around the facility, but also within it, there's limited access to particular parts of the data center, often based on kind of who owns the computers in that facility. Data centers come in lots of shapes and sizes. So the picture on the left is from Southfield, Michigan, so Metro Detroit. This data center has 135,000 square feet of computer equipment. And it takes about 7 megawatts of power from the grid. I pulled the statistics and then did a little research from Crane's Detroit Business. It didn't say what the size of the site was, but just looking at it, I'm guessing it's an acre or two. I mean, it's, you can see it looks like an office building. This is by 123net, which there's lots of 123net buildings across Michigan. So that's kind of on the what more people define as a data center side of things, like look and feel. That's the small side. On the big side, we have something like Saline Township in my neck of the woods. This one is 1.6 million square feet of computer area, so 10 times bigger than that Southfield facility. But what you might notice is that its electricity use is 200 times more. People might say, why? Well, they're packing increasingly those computers even closer together. Something that I learned in the process is that the data processing can only move at the speed of light. There is a limitation. And so you need to make, if you want to process a whole bunch of data and have the biggest algorithm, you need those computers to be really close together. And so sometimes they do it within the same kind of computer cabinet, but this is also why in some places, many data centers are in the same vicinity so that they are able to talk to each other in shorter distances. Okay. If you're a data center developer, what are you looking for? The first thing is electricity. So they really want to be for the big data centers, they want to be near a transmission line. And honestly, anybody wants to be near the point in the transmission line where there's already a break. That's at a substation, electrical substation. So those are key places what they're looking for. But also, those smaller data centers still don't need to be by big transmission lines. Those are you know, the big pylon ones, not the ones that serve individual households. Smaller ones can be in the distribution grid, but again, near a beefed up kind of distribution line. And again, they want to be at that substation where there's already a connection to the grid. Data centers need to be where there's backbone fiber. I have failed to get a map of where there is this backbone fiber across the state of Michigan. But this is effectively the superhighway of the internet. And so if you want to get your information to and from the internet, you've got to be on that superhighway. When I find it, I will update the guidebook and post it so that people know kind of where that is in their neck of the woods. A data center, this is in contrast. I'm going to do a lot of contrast with solar farms because that's what I mostly know about. So sometimes a solar project can be spread over multiple parcels that are not necessarily contiguous. A data center doesn't want that. It wants the land area that is contiguous, in part so that it's easier to secure in the facility. And if a data center is going to be cooled with water, then it needs access to a water source. And I'm going to talk more about cooling in a few slides from now. But also one of the reasons that it's really interesting for me to think about this is that a data center wants what so many other industrial facilities want, or other developers, not even industrial facilities, residential developers. They want cleared land, right? It's cheaper to start there. They want to have a place where there's low millage rates for paying property taxes, right? It reduces their property tax bill, all things considered. And so this is often why townships that have ample land, it's cleared, especially if it's agricultural land, and lower millage rates are places where data centers want to go. But they're also looking for favorable zoning. They want a community that says, yes, you can build your data center here. Okay, the next, I should have moved this confession to you. I've given this presentation like 4 times, and every time I kind of tweak the order a little bit. This slide should go 2 slides from now. After the next introduction, because what I'm going to talk about next is the impacts on communities. You don't need to read this. It's in the guidebook. The point that this is trying to make, what this is showing are the 2 tax incentives, the sales and use tax incentive. The incentive, like that it's sales tax free to a data center developer, is true for both of these. The one on the left was passed in 2015 in the Snyder administration. The one on the right is 2025. The key point that I want you to take away from this is that on the left, there's a whole bunch of things about clean energy, green building standards, water source, property taxes, where there's no requirements for the data center to meet in order to receive that tax incentive, sales tax incentive. On the left, on the right-hand side, the enterprise data center tax incentive, this is the newer one, there's a whole bunch more requirements. So one of the key puzzles that I was trying to sort out early on is, well, if this new one has so many requirements, why are data centers showing up now and not back in 2015? Here's what I have learned. On the left-hand side, the qualified data center tax incentive, the developer doesn't get a certificate from the state saying you qualify and you will qualify for the entire life of your project. They claim that sales tax incentive when they go to buy, they claim tax-free status when they go to buy their computer equipment. And computer equipment, just like yours and mine, like it gets outdated pretty quickly. They're replacing that equipment a lot. So that's why they're really seeking sales tax incentives, because they're buying that equipment frequently. How frequently? I've heard anything from 1 to 5 years in terms of how often they're refreshing that. Okay, so, but they don't get a certificate at the beginning. They just claim it when they go to buy that equipment. And what they don't know is, first of all, if they get audited and they don't meet the couple of qualifications, then they're gonna have to pay back sales tax. But also, they don't know if that sales tax incentive is gonna be there for the life of that data center. So that's a little bit risky for them. By contrast, on the right-hand side, they have more criteria that they need to meet. There's a higher bar set in order to qualify, but they get that certificate in hand before they start the project. And that certificate is good until 2050, or in some cases until 2065. So there's a lot, like, yes, it's harder to get it, But once you have it, it can't be taken away. And so here's what I can tell, like the reason that I'm saying this is that sometimes people look over on the right-hand side and say, oh, there's a lot of things that the data center is going to do, possibly if they want that surety. But I've heard from multiple people that data center developers are doing a balance, right? Do we want to risk not potentially having the incentive in the future, but that we don't have a whole bunch of hoops to jump through? So I tell communities, while a lot of these requirements are about things that community members care about, you really don't know whether a data center is going to comply with the newer standards or not. Maybe they're going to risk it and just go after the easier one to get, but that it comes with some risk. Okay, so let's talk about some of those things though, and what communities, or what impacts the data center might have. So first of all, how much electricity does a data center use? I mean, I showed you the picture of Southfield versus Saline Township. It really depends. It depends on the size of the data center. And also, importantly, it's not necessarily correlated with the square footage of the data center building itself. Some of these numbers are big, and I do energy all the time, but I recognize that not everybody does. So what is 2 gigawatts, 2,000 megawatts of energy? I just said that and I should know like how many houses it powers, and I don't, because my brain is better in the, yeah. You know, all right. Well, I wanna, is that okay if I, tell me how many houses a gigawatt powers? Yeah. 1.4 gigawatts, yeah. Okay, I was gonna say, yeah, like that sounds right. I was thinking that it was about 800,000 households per gigawatt, which is right. All right, so we're doing the same math. Thank you very much. Look at these people that you elect. Good job, guys. Like, okay. The context that I want to provide is how much electricity use we have in the entire state of Michigan. 32,000 megawatts. So 1,000 or 1,400 megawatts is a lot. And like whether you think that is gigantic in comparison to all of the electricity that Michigan uses or not, like I provide those numbers for you to make your own judgment, but those are the solid numbers. Okay. Sometimes people say, well, that feels like a lot of electricity. Who's going to regulate that? Like, who's going to keep them in check? Well, there is no usage police. However, the data center needs to get power from the utility. And in the state of Michigan, they're locked into the utility in their area. Well, 90% of electricity users are locked into the utility in their area. And the regulator of the utilities is the Michigan Public Service Commission, MPSC. The Michigan Public Service Commission makes the utilities who really like to sell power. Let's not lie. They are very excited about data centers because they can sell more power, okay? But the Public Service Commission makes the utilities every single year prove that they have enough power to serve their customers. So that is kind of what the police is. They can't tell you, yes, there's going to be enough power and take on a new data center if there's not enough power. The Public Service Commission makes sure that there's enough power, that makes the utilities prove that they've got enough power to serve all of their customers. The Public Service Commission also regulates how the utilities charge all customers, including data center developers, for the electricity that they produce. And that, I'm gonna move on quickly to the next slide because that's about the data center, but what about us? What's this gonna do to our rates, right? I'll be honest, we don't know. There is conflicting evidence across the country about what impact data centers have. In lots of the places with data centers, including Virginia, electric rates have gone up. In other places, like North Dakota, with large loads are added, rates have gone down. So what gives? How can those things possibly be true? So here's the truism across the country. We have an aging electrical system that is in need of upgrades. Like Michigan is no different than that. If you have an electrical system that is built bigger than what its current usage is, if you can get more users into that system without expanding the system, but using those new users to just replace that system, you are taking those costs and spreading them over more people. And so that's how rates can go down, like in North Dakota. If, however, you don't have capacity in your system and you are having to expand the system to bring on those new customers, then you would not expect rates to go down. And if you don't have policies in place that make those new customers that are causing an expansion in the system to pay for themselves, then you're going to get rates that go up, right? In Michigan, for that second situation, the Public Service Commission has cost of service rate making, which effectively says that the Public Service Commission makes the utilities set their rates so that different classes of customer, residential customers, commercial customers, large industrial customers, pay their own way. Like, this is part of the enterprise data center, that newer tax exemption. They said, like, you can't cross-subsidize. And this is one of the things where it didn't actually need to be in there, because that's the law anyway. Like, it doesn't make a difference if the data center developer is using that sales use and use tax exemption or the old one. Like, that is the law. So also, both consumers and DTE, you guys are consumers-ish territory. Some of you are. Some of you also are in, like, municipal utilities, yeah, okay. Both of them have gone to the Public Service Commission to say, hey, we would really like to have data center companies. And the Public Service Commission has said, okay, and they've got to pay their own way. They've got to pay up front so that if we expand the system for the data center developers, the rest of us aren't left with the costs if they go belly up. That's not a technical term, but you know what I mean? If the data center doesn't come to be. So that's how the Public Service Commission rate making works. I study energy, so I'm gonna just tell you, like, I wish I had more information to be able to answer this question. We don't really know what the cost of our electricity. We have an aging system. We also have state laws that are requiring the utilities to expand the use of clean energy. That's a lot of building anyway. We don't know what that is going to cost right now without data centers. And we haven't seen what will happen if we include data centers in it. That analysis hasn't been done. I wish it had. I've been asking everybody that I know who is capable of doing that analysis to, like, give me the answer so that I can tell it. But it hasn't been done. And I think one of the things, because I study renewable energy projects, if we grow our electricity pie, sorry, I'm a recovering engineer, I understand, like, please don't send me hate mail. Actually, the very first presentation, the feedback that I got was, you didn't explain the electricity system in technical enough terms. No, but no, most people are not engineers, so please. Okay, if we grow our electricity pie and data centers also have to get clean power, the utilities need to buy a whole bunch more solar and wind. If there's not enough solar and wind projects in the queue for that, then if you are a solar wind developer, you can name your price, right? Like, there's a huge demand for your thing and not enough supply. And that is not taken into account in rate making. And so I've asked questions. I don't know what will happen here. There's also some ability for the Public Service Commission to effectively say, actually, utilities, you don't have to meet the clean energy standard, because it might be too expensive if we grow the electricity pie, which might make some people happy and other people sad. I'm just telling you, these are the rules in Michigan. So the long story short, we don't know what will happen to rates. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you. Okay, the next thing, how much water does a data center use? Another one where it really depends. So if a data center uses evaporative cooling, so it uses the water to take away the heat, it can use a lot, like 5 million gallons per day. If a data center uses closed loop cooling, so it's taking a fluid and circulating, because Water is okay in taking away heat, but there's fluids that are better at taking away heat. So if it's circulating a fluid or if it's doing like real good air conditioning, right? Then a data center doesn't have to use any water at all except for effectively the water in the bathrooms and the kitchenette, like any other kind of office. So it really depends. I don't do water on a day-to-day basis. 5 million gallons a day seems like a lot to me. So I did the research to figure out what is that in context. The Great Lakes Water Authority, so that is the water utility serving a lot of Metro Detroit, it uses 1 billion gallons of water per day. But even more interesting, I think, is that Michigan's power plants, thermoelectric power plants, so the ones that heat up water to run the turbines, so nuclear, coal, and some natural gas plants withdraw 5.4 billion gallons per day. So this leads to my next slide, which is that there's this energy-water trade-off and a real conundrum. Because on the one hand, evaporative cooling systems do lead to more water withdrawal at the local level, but they use less electricity because you just let the water take away the heat. If you use a closed system, instead, you're using less water, but you're using more electricity. And while we still have power plants that use water for cooling, we have this indirect water effect. So which one is more environmentally friendly or uses less water? Again, we are the Great Lakes state. It is a crying shame that nobody has done this analysis. We don't know. Certainly at the local level, what you care about is local water withdrawals, then the closed loop system is better. But if you think about the global, like Michigan as a whole, right? It's possible that actually using water to cool it locally uses less water overall because it's using less electricity. Okay. In a situation where a data center is cooled by water, though, I did some research to say who is responsible for regulating that. It is EGLE, that's again the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, their Geological Resource Management Division. And I learned something, as I do all the time, but they regulate any pumps that are capable of producing 70 gallons per minute. I did the math. That is 100,000 gallons per day. So that would be low for a data center that's cooled with water. Like, that's going to be regulated by EGLE. There's extra scrutiny if that water withdrawal is in a place that is hydrologically sensitive or if they're withdrawing a whole lot of water on the order of 2 million gallons per day. Like there's additional permits that the developer would need to get from EGLE. These rules aren't just for data centers. Actually, they don't mention data centers. They're for any producer of water. So if you have an ag facility that's withdrawing anything more than 70 gallons per minute, you've got to go through this. If you are a water utility who's withdrawing for your customers water, this is the kind of permitting. If you're an industrial user, that's also required. If a data center developer is going to claim the new enterprise data center sales and use tax exemption, the law requires that they hook up to a municipal utility that has the power, a municipal water utility that has the power, the ability to serve them. And so something that is important, as an example, in Saline Township, they don't have a water utility that has the power to serve them. So the data center there is forming a new municipal utility that is just a well to serve that data center so that the data center can access the sales use and use tax exemption. If there is a municipal utility, though, in the area, the municipal utility, because of the Safe Drinking Water Act, they are required to maintain capacity and reliability for existing customers. So they wouldn't be allowed to hook up a data center if it means that they don't have, that it's going to jeopardize the capacity for their existing customers. Okay, what impact might a data center have on air quality? This is all tied to energy or emissions associated with electricity generation. So if a data center is pulling from the power grid, there will be emissions somewhere in Michigan because we still do have natural gas and coal-fired power plants, but they're not going to be in the host community. Very often, though, data centers want to have backup generation in that at their site for if the power grid goes down. And so those backup generators, I mean, my parents have a backup home generator. I don't, because I don't, but my parents do. And so I was like, who regulates that? If they're big, if they're small enough, nobody regulates it. But if they're big enough, Eagle regulates this. And don't quiz me on this. It's in the guidebook about like what the thresholds are. Also, you can't cheat the system by putting up a whole bunch of small generators and saying, we got around this. Eagle has probably in the past learned that they needed to close that loophole. So so it's very clear in there kind of what the thresholds are. The point that I want to make is if we need data centers overall in the country, if they're going to be somewhere, honestly, we want them in places with cleaner grids. Because air quality, sure, it's a local thing, but it affects broader broader places. So data centers that go to cleaner grids are going to be more environmentally friendly. But also, thinking about how we get data centers to have flexible operations is really important. And for a minute, I'm going to geek out with you and give you a little lesson on energy. Our electrical demand is not even over the course of a day. The peak power demand is usually 3 to 7 p.m. in the summer. We're a summer peaking state right now, when effectively air conditioners at work are on and people are starting to go home and turning on their air conditioners and their ovens, right? So there's a whole around waiting, they only operate during that peak time. That's the dirtiest time for the grid because we're turning on all of these often gas engines, but also it's the most expensive time. And so if we're able to tell some people, maybe a data center that's serving up YouTube videos, not the ones that are processing important medical records, but the ones that are non-critical path, right? If we can tell them, hey, don't turn on during the peak, that is one way to make it cleaner. So anyway, more you know. I shouldn't have nerded out to you, but I wanted to. Okay, and I have the microphone. Okay, we're gonna move on to other things. I care about land use, so how might this affect future land use? In terms of use of farmland, guys, my PhD is in farmland preservation. So I'm gonna say it's a death by 1,000 cuts. There are a whole bunch of things that are gobbling up farmland. All things considered, this is not the biggest one. Controversial take, maybe. It's not the biggest one directly. However, the energy to power it has an impact, right? And so thinking about where that energy goes is really important. Also, from a land use perspective, any kind of development, what impact it has long-term depends on where you site it. If you put it on places with sensitive natural features, steep slopes where there can be lots of erosion, if you put it in wetlands, that is going to have a more deleterious effect, bigger impact than if you put it in a place that doesn't have sensitive natural features. And that is not unique to data centers. That is land use 101. Thing that I think about a lot is, will this become, what happens at the end of the life? Will this become a brownfield? Because let's be honest, we've got a history where industry hasn't always left no trace, right? We're gonna talk about that because I think that that is a legit thing. And we have tools. We have decommissioning tools to make sure that industries clean up after themselves. But it's not different than other industries, I would say, in terms of long-term impacts. How about quality of life? Okay, again, this is true for any kind of development. Your favorite, the development of your favorite thing, construction stinks. Right? It is really disruptive. I'm not gonna lie, there's no sugarcoating that. There is traffic, there is noise, there is vibration. That is your chance really most often for soil erosion, right? And so that is the time, and we also know that, and so most places have construction time requirements to try to minimize some of those impacts. when a data center gets put in a greenfield, which is what they want to do because, again, it's cleared and it's cheap millage rates usually, this is where there could be a real change, though, visually during the day, like how are we going to screen it? But actually the thing that I don't think is talked about enough is the nighttime change. When you put it in a place that doesn't have street lights and suddenly you have security lights around it, like it's not just the day that is changing, it's at night. Ask me about the red lights at the top of wind turbines. Like, that's the thing that people don't think about, really, because they visit places during the day, not necessarily at night. The other thing that the more I talk to communities, like, and again, I didn't say this, actually, that was a lovely, very nice intro. And it didn't say, I grew up at the end of a dirt road in Monroe County. Like, I grew up on a farm. I live in the city of Ann Arbor now, but like this, I grew up at the end of a dirt road. Yes, there are some noisy things in rural places, but also it's really quiet. And so the sound associated with backup generators, right, or the mechanical equipment is an important thing to quality of life. And very often, most rural places don't necessarily have sound standards, right, because it's not a big, hasn't historically been a big deal. We're going to talk about what I think some things that you could apply. Who's responsible for these kind of things? These kind of things are taken care of in zoning. I've got a couple more slides before I get to zoning, though, first, and next time maybe I'll reorganize this so it's a nicer transition, but okay. That's note to self. I've talked mostly about negative things. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, somebody said, why would anyone ever want to host a data center? It's economic development. These are huge economic projects. And what has driven a lot of the state sales and use tax exemptions are the promise of construction jobs. Thousands of construction jobs. There are some long-term jobs. The number varies wildly. Like, some of it is like what size of project we're talking about. I think it's also whether we're talking about direct jobs versus indirect or induced jobs. So direct jobs would be those in the data center themselves, hired by the data center developer, and that's pretty small, and it's mostly like security folks, as far as I can tell. Like, I've been trying to understand what kind of jobs, but it's mostly security, kind of maintenance, HVAC maintenance folks. Indirect jobs are the folks that they're buying things from for maintenance. Or very often, again, there are companies who own some of the computer equipment in. They've got their own employees that they're bringing in to do the maintenance that they need to on those computer servers. So those are kind of indirect jobs. But where there's big multipliers, and I think why there's huge swings in what some of these numbers look like, is induced jobs. There's a lot of spending that happens as a result of buying billions of dollars of computer equipment. And the idea is that when you spend that money, somebody's got a little bit more cash in their pocket. Or when the data center developer pays property taxes, which we're going to get to on the next slide, the local government has the ability to spend those dollars. And so those are called the induced jobs associated with it. So there are jobs, most of them are in the construction industry. And part of this is you can tell, like, how big is the parking lot around a data center? Pretty small. Okay, so from a local perspective, why, right? If it's not necessarily tons of long-term jobs, why? It's because of property taxes. This is huge, huge amount of investment. So the State Tax Commission, that's the STC there, says that data centers are a commercial use. They would pay commercial personal property taxes. A couple years ago, the state got rid of personal property taxes for a lot of things, but not this kind of commercial personal property tax. The other thing, so they're going to be paying taxes on that investment. The other thing to know, though, is that a lot of their investment, nobody can actually tell me how much of the investment in a data center is in the computers and how much of it is in the facility and the buildings. And that matters because the facilities and the buildings pay real commercial property taxes. And those are pretty steady over time. The personal property taxes on the computer equipment effectively follow this depreciation schedule. And it's explicit in the assessor's manual that in year one, you can tax 60% of the value of that computer equipment. But it goes down pretty quickly. Year 7, you can tax 8% of the value. That also makes sense. What is that computer worth 7 years from now, right? And what is hard is that the sense is that those data center developers are going to be replacing that equipment regularly. So the curve is going to look a lot like this. It's going to start out high, go down a little bit. When they replace the equipment, their personal property tax liability is going to go back up to the 60%, and then it's going to go down. So I've been trying to get a developer's sense of the spending over time so that I could better project what that might look like. I have failed so far, but I'm working on it because I'm a huge property tax nerd. Don't get me started on wind and solar property taxes. Okay, the other thing is, because this is commercial personal property, local governments are allowed, they have the option to offer property tax incentives, 198 agreements. And I underline that option, nobody's forcing you to, but the reason that some communities are considering it is because of other community benefits agreements. So very often, the companies developing really big data centers, hyperscale data centers, have deep pockets. This is a huge billions of dollar investment. And so folks say they might be willing to spend some of that in the community. In Saline Township, this, again, is that 1.4 gigawatt data center. They are giving, in addition to the property taxes, $2.5 million to a community investment fund, $4 million for farmland preservation, $8 million for the fire department, right? Here's the trick. That is the result of a court settlement. It's really hard. I don't want to go into the Zoning Enabling Act and all of that, but it's really hard. There's a thing in zoning law that are called exactions. You have to be really careful that you don't exact, that there's no other word. Ask a developer for, it's not pay to play. You give us this amount of money, we're going to give you a land use permit. You have to be really careful with that. You have to show an essential nexus. You have to show rough proportionality, which the average people don't know. Bottom line is, local governments can't require the data center developer to give them these community benefits. They can get in trouble for doing that. The exception, the enforceability of this is if you give a public benefit, like a property tax incentive, you can ask for a public benefit in exchange. That makes that community benefit agreement more enforceable. And also, again, in Saline Township, it was through a court settlement, so that was enforceable. Okay. We'll talk about zoning. Am I okay on time? Is it I only have 5 more slides, but I want to, okay, thank you. All right. Sorry, sometimes I talk, especially when it's late. Okay. How many planning commissioners are there? Oh, all right, this is review for you. For people that are not planning commissioners, let me give you the introduction to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. Okay, one thing from the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, you can't ban a lawful land use for which there is a demonstrated need unless there is no place in your community for that, which is a really hard thing to prove. So you can't ban a lawful land use. Also, just being silent on a land use doesn't work, because silence means it's a ban, and so sometime somebody's gonna say, I wanna build name the thing that is not in your zoning ordinance, and you're gonna be forced to do something. The other thing, well, we'll get to this actually, I have another thing, but I'm gonna get to it in the next slide. Okay, and you can't ban it, But you can, the next sentence in the Zoning Enabling Act effectively is, you can have reasonable regulations. It doesn't have to be a free-for-all. You are most solid in putting those reasonable regulations in if there are verifiable impacts that you are trying to mitigate, or if you are consistent. So you are not just picking on a data center because it's a data center. If other big users of water or electricity are the thing that you're picking on, then you're in better legal footing. And I should say this, and Tyler will be happy I'm saying this, I am not a lawyer. Like, you should ask your lawyer, but like, this is what I have come to learn. Okay. Finally, zoning is supposed to be based on a plan. You should have a master plan that it's based on. And so that should guide effectively it has goals about what it is that you're trying to protect in your community and where all of the land uses belong. And that should be your friend in thinking about where data centers belong. Okay, here are the 5 things that I say in the guide about what a local government or a township in this title of this is to do. The first thing is to evaluate your industrial zone. Do you have one? You should. Somewhere. I mean, this was actually part of the lawsuit in Saline Township. It was like, we don't have any industrial zone. The next question, though, is if you have one, good. If you don't have one, you don't have to expand it. Is it appropriate to expand it? So, first of all, I would say go to your master plan. What does that say for where industrial uses are appropriate? The next thing I would say is, okay, industrial uses, I didn't mention this. I think that you should treat data centers like other big industrial uses. If you're gonna open your zoning ordinance up, apply it to all industry. We haven't seen industry in Michigan in a long time. Industry is important. These are all things that if you wanna be ready for the next industry to seize an opportunity, you should have ready in your zoning. So I should have said that. Okay. But where does that industry want to go? It wants to go where there's water or electric infrastructure. So that is where it makes sense to have industrial uses. The other thing, though, too, is that you should consider what your surrounding land uses are. Like, very often zoning puts things in different places. Like, right? Smelly, dirty things go in one place away from where people are sleeping, right? It's tricky if we haven't had industry in a while. And we've now got neighborhoods that are right on the edges of our industrial districts, which leads to, what is the process for land uses? What that means is you often in industrial districts, you'll say like industry is allowed by right. It means there's not really discretion. Having something as a special land use allows you to evaluate some of the impacts. I will say this here, this is what I was holding to say. We've had data centers in the state of Michigan for a couple of decades. Many, many zoning ordinances allow for data centers, not the data centers that we were anticipating, and of the footprint that we were anticipating. So actually, if you haven't looked at your zoning ordinance to see what you say about data centers, you might be surprised. Like, you might allow it in office districts or commercial districts, which is appropriate if it's part of an office building. But if we're thinking about a purpose-built thing, we should go look in your zoning. Okay. Going back to what are the current surrounding land uses, again, for all industrial uses, I would consider adding quality of life regulations. So what I mean by that is sound, right? If you don't have a sound ordinance, you don't need to protect industrial uses from each other, so at the industrial user's boundary, but I think thinking about where industrial is abutting residential, having some kind of sound regulation may make for happier neighbors in the future. And for many of these things, for many, many uses, you can buy quieter equipment. It is more expensive, but it is doable very often. Screening, this is like berms or trees. I really don't like berms on farm fields, I'm not gonna lie. But trees are okay. But in industrial districts, like screening makes a lot of sense. Again, not between industrial uses, but with especially where it's abutting residential, I think that makes sense. There's some counties, Emmett County has a dark skies ordinance that applies countywide. Thinking about if that is something that your community values, holding everybody to that, again, not just data centers. Like, this is a time to consider what it is that we value as a community and thinking about how that might be translated into your zoning ordinance. The minimum necessary is just sometimes these ordinances, sometimes security lighting is required by other laws. And so it's just effectively saying, sure, put up your lighting, but only to the minimum necessary. Okay. In this, I would also say decommissioning. So we just came out with, my center just came out with a guide that applies to renewable energy projects, but we talk a lot about decommissioning. Decommissioning is, the first thing is a plan about what happens at the end of the life of that facility, what parts stay and what parts go. So again, I'm gonna use my experience from renewable energy. The access roads for a wind turbine, very often the farmers don't want those taken out. They have liked being able to park their vehicles on it, right? And so like the decommissioning plan would effectively say that stays. Or if you've got a building, particularly one that you're reusing, like, and this is its second life, that building you may want to have stay, right? But there's some things, used servers, for example, that don't have a useful life anymore that you might want gone. And so the decommissioning plan lays out what will stay and what will go. The second component is a financial instrument that effectively says if the developer doesn't decommission according to the plan, there is money in place for the local government to do it. This is the thing that you hope you never have to do. I would say, I actually had a call this morning with a group out of Lansing, and I would say, this is one where it's done a lot for renewables. I wish it were done for other things. Is it enforceable? I don't know. It's unreasonable to require a developer to put a cash escrow, for this decommissioning bond, but a developer can buy a surety bond, effectively an insurance policy. They have to pay a little bit for it, but that's one of the things that honestly, I'll be honest, I wish we had this in place 50 years ago, 100 years ago, right? So that we don't kind of have unclean situations that we have now. And then the third component of decommissioning would be having an agreement that spells out, hey, developer, we expect you to follow your plan. Here are the terms when the local government is allowed to draw upon that surety bond. And here's how we're gonna check, and here's how we're gonna know if your project is at the end of its life. So we have a sample agreement as part of this guidebook. We fast-tracked this guidebook because I thought it would be useful for data centers too. The agreement is it's about renewable energy, but I think it may give you some food for thought about what it might look like in other situations. Okay, third thing, get commitments in writing. I didn't say this when I said before where I live now. I live in Ann Arbor. I sit on the Planning Commission in Ann Arbor. We meet a lot. We have a lot of development. A lot of developers stand at the podium and tell us all the great things about their project, and I'm the jerk on Planning Commission that said, I don't want to hear about it unless you put it in writing. And so I would say, like, if a developer is telling you the generators are only going to run in backup situations, ask them to put it in writing. You can also put in writing if the generators are only there in emergency situations, but they do need to be run once a month for testing. That's a legit thing. We know this. My parents' backup generator runs every Sunday at 2 o'clock. But that's something that you can negotiate with a developer. Like, that can be put in writing. They're actually saying, don't worry about construction. All of these routes, get that in writing. A lot of communities just want to know how much water is being used. And so that's something that if they're saying, we'll do this, like, get it in writing. Also, I'm happy to talk more about what this annual show is and how that can be tied to decommissioning. That's an advanced topic. If you want to write it on your note card, we can come back to. One of the special things, and I care so much about property taxes that I put it as its own bullet, but it's really about getting things in writing, is property tax guarantee. So here's the experience. Did people know about dark stores? Where like big box stores will build a building that's worth a lot of money and then say like, it's worth nothing to anybody other than a Menards or a Home Depot. And so effectively say that they don't have to pay as much property taxes. This has also happened with wind energy, where there was a tax table that the state tax commission put together, and it changed multiple times, and every time it changed, it led to the developer paying less taxes. And it left a lot of heartburn in a lot of places. So, to kind of overcome that, there's a developer, a solar developer. I can totally do this in 2 minutes, thank you. A solar developer in the Upper Peninsula effectively provided the local government a property tax guarantee that said, we're telling you this is what we're paying in property taxes. If the state tax commission changes the tables, we will still pay you this. If the state tax commission changes the tables and we owe you more, we will pay you more. But this is the baseline. And you should talk to an attorney about how you can make that happen, but I would just say there is an example in the state of Michigan for this. And if the biggest benefit is in property taxes, I don't think it's a bad thing to ask for, at least. I'm a planner. I'm going to tell you to plan for it, but I'm getting the time signal. So I'm just going to say there's heat associated with data centers. Do you have energy? Do you have uses in your community for heat? Where do you have infrastructure to reuse, particularly that's already served by energy infrastructure? What I didn't put on here is that there are some water systems in the state of Michigan, public water systems, that were built for much bigger populations, and they really could use a bigger user of water. Like, this may be a solution to some public water systems needs, is a data center that could use water and make full benefit of that system. I have closing thoughts, but I want to get to your questions. So we can come back to them if you really want to know. But I already told you, you should plan for all of the things, all of the industry things. Okay. Do you have questions?
Do you have questions? If you have other ones, we can still got somebody who will grab them for me, or I can. But starting off, Sarah, talking about the water pieces, we talked a lot about the inputs on the water. When water is being used to cool, where does that go on the base side of things? Your research know anything on that, especially if it's warm still, or those other fluids you talked about?
Yeah, so some of it is evaporated, right? Like, that's actually, evaporative cooling is by its nature evaporated. Sometimes it is discharged. If it's discharged, I go into this in the guidebook, but there's a mix of whether a data center will use water-cooled system or not. If it's discharged, there's a lot of regulations if it's discharged into a body of water, like environmentally. And if it's discharged into a municipal system, that is also regulated by the municipal water system. So that is a less common question, so I don't have it off the top of my head, but we can pull up the guidebook too. In a closed loop system, this is one of the things that I've been trying to figure out, is what's in that fluid? How often does it need to be changed? Does it need to be changed? I'm told that it's closed loop, and so it ought not need to be changed, but also asking about, I've been trying to find out, like, what might be in it. So if there is a leak or something, how can first responders be ready for that? Yeah.
Going to pull the first responder segue. Fire, emergency response at data center, something you see with BESS and
Yeah.
other energy uses. Anything related like that on the data centers to bring up?
Yeah, and BESS, if you don't know, is battery energy storage system. So big utility scale batteries. It is the hottest question about batteries. Fire response is this is not something that's been a big consideration in other places. Usually, it's not uncommon for big industrial users to have an emergency response plan where effectively you ask the developer to tell you, what should we do? What should our fire department be prepared for if there is an incident in this place, just so that you don't put them in risk. But it's not, Tyler or whoever asked that question, been something that has been of a big concern to other places. We haven't seen huge data center fires or anything like that.
Okay. A lot of these questions were answered during the presentation, so I'm going to use that to say, will slides be shared out? Has that happened
I'm
yet?
happy to share slides, but I don't know how you will find them.
I think we've got a registration list. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So yes, those questions that were covered, things like how much electricity is used in Michigan, how much water, those slides will be shared out. What is the life of a data center? We talked a lot about the individual components, but the facility
The
broader,
facility
yeah.
itself, so it varies. I mean, I haven't gotten a great answer. Here's what I tell a lot of people. I don't think that our need for data is going away. Like, it's grown exponentially. So the stuff inside will continue to evolve, obviously, but I cannot imagine a situation where a connection to the internet, that backbone fiber, and a connection to the electricity grid is not something that a data center developer is going to want to take advantage of. And in terms of thinking about overall life cycle, I think if you don't have to go through the construction process all over again, like reusing that facility seems pretty wise in my mind. So I haven't gotten great. The numbers that I've seen in terms of jobs are like 20 to 25 years. They're projecting out their revenue streams over 25 years, mostly. But again, I might say that's its first life.
We've been using very generic data center developers, those sorts of things. Any comments on who is building these? What are the companies behind them? Is it a bunch?
Yes.
Just who are these developers going to be when they show up in communities?
Some feedback that I got from the guidebook is that next time I need to go in a hyperscaler and all of these things, which I will. A lot of the attention is for big AI hyperscale data centers. There's 5 or 6 companies that are really in a race right now to develop big data centers to be able to create the algorithm that knows everything, right? Like that's what they're racing for. They're really looking to be the first. Here's the thing. Somebody's going to lose that race. Somebody's going to lose that race. The person who wins, maybe they're going to buy some of the other sites, but maybe not, which is why like thinking about what that looks like is important, like thinking about what happens with the person who loses the race. Those hyperscalers don't always do their own development. Very often they hire real estate firms to like go out and find them sites, develop them, and then sell it to the Googles, the Oracles, the fill in the blank, Microsoft, right? Like I don't follow it enough, and I don't use AI to know. But that's the thing. But those are the big ones. There's a whole bunch of other smaller kind of cloud computing facilities that are about providing internet or about not doing AI stuff, but instead storing, our medical records and storing records for our driver's licenses and all of the things. Like all of that is done in data centers, right? Also, there are data centers. This is what I learned in 2015. One of the key reasons that first sales and use tax exemption passed was because in Lansing, they were trying to make Michigan a site for autonomous vehicles, right? That's the next iteration of our car industry. And if you have autonomous vehicles, you don't want the internet that they're drawing from to go down when it's driving down the road, right? And so, like, in order to do that, you need to have really good computing power. You need to have in the places where people are driving cars. And so that was part of the history of that initial sales and use tax exemption, which, again, that is quite different. So there are, so that's what I know to that end. Like, it's a range of actors.
A couple of policy questions, wondering, with the MPSC and their cost of service rate making, is that MPSC policies come from state statute? We're getting in the weeds now.
We're totally getting into the weeds. I cite it in the guide. There's a footnote. Email me and I will give you the footnote number. Or you can just, like, if you Control F the guide for that. But I can't remember where it comes from. But I think it is from rules. there's a process to go through rulemaking, and that is, I think it's a rule rather than a statute, but don't quote me on that. But we included citations. There's a lot of citations in the guide.
Yes, plug for the guides and their footnotes and commentaries. They are phenomenal coming out of U of M. Other question, we talked about noise in the presentation. I think I'm almost through most of mine. Down south of the border in Indiana, there are concerns about data centers and their water needs, dewatering homes, causing wells to go dry for private residences. We talked about the EGLE process for those large water users. Does that take into consideration the aquifer or other smaller users in the area?
My understanding is that because EGLE is looking at it, they're looking at the where that's effectively drawing from. Dewatering, something that doesn't happen for renewable energy projects, so I had to learn about. This is done when you're digging the foundation around, right? And particularly if there's high water table, like how you're getting rid of the water so you can make the concrete cure. There's not specific regulations, to the best of my understanding, associated with dewatering. Again, I'm sorry. This is the first time I've actually gotten this question in a forum, so I need to go back and read what I learned 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Yes.
But we did look into this, and I would say that the regulations associated with dewatering for any construction project are likely at play. I mean, it's the same thing. It's not different for data centers than something else.
And then, given where we are, any talk, it didn't come up in your power, but nuclear as supplying some of this, a potential expansion there? Oh, I did something.
You did? Okay. So here's the deal. I learned the best information from the guide from the Department of Energy's nuclear team, because nuclear sees data centers as like their ticket for small modular reactors. Like they were like, we got a small footprint, we need a big user of power, this is awesome for us. So Department of Energy is really interested in, well, the nuclear industry is really interested in data centers because they think that they can supply it. That is true. We're seeing some nuclear power plants that have been, there's discussion about 3 Mile Island coming back on for data centers, right? And so we're seeing that small modular reactors at University of Michigan, go blue, apparently they claim to have the #1 nuclear engineering department in the country. Like they've been talking, like active talks about small modular reactors. I've been involved in a lot of them because I think about like, well, what is the community going to think about this? And what do I need to learn? Also, I grew up in Monroe County, like Fermi area. They have the best ball fields at their public schools because like the best jobs. So I have no qualms about nuclear. Small modular reactors are not commercial yet. Like they're undergoing testing right now in Idaho, but they're not like ready for the market. So while nuclear is possible, it's not, if a data center wants to get on tomorrow, they're not gonna be able to power it with new nuclear. Yeah, that's the reality.
Okay. So getting close, probably over on time now, so just want to wrap up 2 quick ones. The guide that has been referenced, where can folks find that and all of those different resources?
I'm going to send a recap email.
And Ambrosia just let me know, she'll be sending recap email to everybody who
Good, 'cause
registered.
I can't go backwards.
And include presentation slides and some of the links we've talked about. And then just kind of a final wrap-up question that I know local government folks always like to ask. Any good examples from around the state of communities who are doing this, been through it, we can look to as exemplars of what to do or maybe what not to do?
So I think one of the things that's tricky is, I mean, there's data centers already in Michigan, but not this scale, right? I'll say, I think that the city of Mason has really good FAQs about data centers and what is possible. I would point you there. They've developed an ordinance. I understand that it has not been without controversy, but it effectively says we are differentiating based on like size of things, which might make sense, right? To not effectively preclude the small-ish kind of data centers that have been non-controversial, but to say like, if we're gonna have a hyperscaler, here are lots of criteria if it's gonna be a gigawatt. So I think that that's one that I would point people to. I mean, I think a lot of places are trying to sort it out. We didn't get the question about moratoria, but I think I'm gonna answer it.
Go for it.
Which is that it might make sense to push pause. You should get your legal counsel involved though, because first of all, like it needs to be time limited. You need to be making progress. You need to know what questions, why you're pushing pause. Know what questions you need to have answered, and you need to be making progress towards making those questions. And also, again, I'm not an attorney, but I presented with an attorney at MTA Capital Conference. I don't know what week it was recently, last week, the week before. Most places can't just do a moratoria via resolution. They need an ordinance, a police power and a zoning ordinance for if you're going to do a moratoria. So call your item. I have not related to any attorneys. I don't, sorry if you're an attorney here. Like, I don't love the idea of saying like, go talk to your attorney. This is one where you should talk to your attorney. There's a lot of scrutiny about this. So you could do it, but with advice of an attorney.
So I think I've run through most of my questions. Apologies if I didn't directly answer it. That's because it's talked about already in the slides or presentation. But yeah,
Thanks.
I want to say thanks for coming down to CAS, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. It takes a special person to get up in front of everybody, especially when it's live streamed. You know, you did well. We appreciate you coming. So, like we said, you're going to send me the slides or send administration the slides, and we can make a decision at that point whether to put them on our county website for somebody to click on them and get them, or send me or the administrator an email, and we'll get them to you, to Howard Township especially, to the zoning administrators. All right. All right. With that said, you ain't got to go home, but you got to leave here. So if you could, we'll leave, and that way we can secure the building, and have a good day and stay safe. God bless you.